Whenever it gets cold, we always get texts and calls from friends and family concerned that we aren't warm enough here in the camper. And actually, we are warm enough, and we also have plenty of backup plans in case one of our heat sources fails. Now in the summer, if the air conditioning goes out, we're kind of stuck. And our AC right now is on the blink. It's fine, it's not fine, nobody can find anything wrong with it. And because it's under warranty, it's going to have to die completely before we can get it fixed. So last summer we had some pretty miserable days, but in the winter when it's cold, we're fine if one of our heat sources goes out. Of course, the most obvious way how we heat our home in the winter is through the heater that comes with a camper. It runs on propane. We have 2 bottles. I don't like to run it very much because it's hard to tell when it's running out. There's just not any real accurate gauges out there for that. Another thing that we use, and this runs off electricity, is our Vornado. So we're in a really good situation because we can use electricity. If we don't have electricity, we have other options as well. This thing is expensive to use if you use it 24/7. So we just use it a little bit, and what this does is it maximizes the heat from another heat source. So if I'm cooking, I will turn this on and face it toward the stove, and it will grab that heat and fill the room with it. Sometimes we'll put another space heater that actually blows heat out a little bit stronger than this one does, and that will maximize the heat that is being blown by the other space heater. So this has been a really important thing for us. If it tips over, it will turn off. So it is very safe. So this has been really great. You just have to be careful with any heat source that you use within the home. This is the other space heater we have. I really like this space heater. It's a Honeywell. I think we got it at Lowe's or Walmart. It's not expensive at all, but it kicks out a good amount of heat. Now, once I point the Vornado across the room from it, it works even better. We keep our house really cold at night. So I like to have it right next to the bed, so when we wake up in the morning, I turn that on for a little bit to warm up the bedroom. Again, we do not leave this unattended. I make sure blankets aren't near it, and we never ever leave it on overnight. I now cover all our space heaters with pillowcases when we're not using them because they do get full of dust and that can start a fire. I bought this when I went camping with a friend of mine in November. If you've watched that video, you've seen us talk about this. We haven't used this yet in the camper, but if we had to, we could. It's called a Portable Buddy Mr. Heater, and it actually works very, very well. It does have a slight odor to it, kind of like a very mild kerosene heater odor, if you've ever smelled that before. This has a lot of safety features. It has an automatic shut off if the oxygen levels get too low, and it also will turn off if it tips over. However, this is another thing that we would never use without proper ventilation overnight or unattended. But it's super, super easy to work. So we're going to show you how that happens. It runs off little propane bottles. It's got a striker, and you just have to flip it really fast. Sometimes it takes a couple of tries. And then you hold that down for 30 seconds. Once that 30 seconds is up, you turn the heater on. And there you go. When my friend Regina and I used it in the tent, it was pretty cold, and we were going to give it 10 minutes before we reported back how it was working. After about 6 minutes, we couldn't take it anymore. So it works very, very well, and we were in a very large tent also. I'm really glad we have this. We intend on using this mainly for tent camping, but it is something that we could use as a backup in case we were ever to run out of propane. You might think, how can you possibly run out of propane? Aren't you prepared enough? First of all, like I mentioned earlier, there really aren't gauges that are super accurate for propane tanks. The other thing is, believe it or not, there are places in this country that are still so remote that it's not easy to get to a place, especially if you're iced in or there's other issues. So it's just one more backup that we have that we're really thankful that we do have, and it's easy to store, very, very transportable. Probably one of the best things we did was to get this heated throw. We sleep on top of it, and even though it's a throw, under the blankets, it kicks off enough heat to really make a difference. another thing to consider when it's cold outside is that you have to have some ventilation still. Even when it's 30 degrees, if we don't have the vents open or a window cracked or something, we get a condensation buildup. Unfortunately, we learned that the hard way. We would get up in the morning and our walls would be like weeping, dripping water down the walls, sometimes dripping water from the ceilings. Just humans breathing will create condensation because the air inside the camper is warmer than the air outside. So you have to really be careful of that. So a couple things that we do is, of course, we leave the vents open, like I said, we'll leave a window cracked, but we also leave cupboard doors open, our closets open. We lost 2 leather jackets and a couple of books when we first started full-timing because we just didn't realize that the condensation was going to build up and then mildew was going to start. It is something to consider when you are camping in colder temperatures.
Our number one solution to being warm in the wintertime is to escape the north. We got to stay south, and that's been helpful. But even at that, there are nights that it gets down into the teens, few and far between. But when it gets that cold, it is too cold to stay in the camper. They're not well insulated. So we have a nice backup generator that we got during the hurricane. This is just another safeguard to make sure that we don't get too cold in the middle of the night if everything else fails. Now the nice thing about this is that it runs off both propane and gas. Everything in this video that we're talking about does not pertain to the north. We stay down here in the Gulf, and we are in a very moderate climate down here. So anything here, don't take it for what goes on up north. Find somebody local up there who's done that before. When we're heating our camper, we are using some electrical appliances. We're also using gas and propane. And because of that, we've got to really be careful with those gases. So we have inside our RV carbon monoxide, propane, as well as a smoke detector. Those 3 are critical, and we always have those.
So as you can see, we have multiple ways of heating this camper. And the great thing is it's such a small space that we can use a smaller heat source that will heat the entire home. When we lived in a stick-built house, that wasn't the case. We couldn't use a space heater this small that would heat the entire house. So we really are at an advantage. So thank you to everyone who's always so concerned when the weather gets cold. Thank you for the calls and the texts and the offers to stay at your house. We really appreciate it. But really, we're in very, very good shape when it gets cold. Now, when our AC goes out in the summer, that might be when you want to give us a call.